The worst cover-up in history. That's US President Donald Trump's reaction to the account of the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. But so far, the measures from the international community against Saudi Arabia in the wake of Turkish President Erdogan's claims that Khashoggi's death was premeditated murder have been modest. Washington has announced that it will be revoking the US visas of 21 Saudis suspected of being involved in the killing. NBC's chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel reports.
Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman on the right, greeting the son of the man Turkey says Saudi Arabia killed in cold blood, Jamal Khashoggi. In Washington, President Trump accused Saudi Arabia not of murdering the journalist, it's admitted that, but of doing it badly.
It was carried out poorly, and the cover-up was one of the worst in the history of cover-ups. It's very simple.
Turkey's president called it premeditated murder. President Erdogan now says Saudi agents set their plot to kill Khashoggi in motion in the 4 days leading up to his death, assembling a team here at the consulate, even scouting out 2 locations to ditch the body. At 1:14, Khashoggi arrives at the consulate. Then this guy emerges. Turkey says he's part of the Saudi hit team, dressed unconvincingly in Khashoggi's clothing and a fake beard, trying to prove Saudi Arabia's initial story that Khashoggi left the building alive. Saudi officials now tell us the plan was to hold Khashoggi for up to 2 days and bring him back to the kingdom.
Because whoever thought of that idea, I think, is in big trouble.
Without citing direct evidence, U.S. intelligence officials tell us it's inconceivable Saudi Arabia's crown prince had no connection to the journalist's murder. Richard Engel, NBC News, Istanbul.
On this story, we can go live to Istanbul, where Christina Jovanovski is there for us. Good morning to you, Christina. Now, the Turkish authorities have been talking about an audio recording that they say would prove that Khashoggi was, or that rather that Saudi top-level officials were involved in Khashoggi's murder. Why has that not been released?
Well, while we didn't have these references to the recordings, we did hear from the Turkish President Erdogan that there's more information that is being assessed, that there's CCTV footage or surveillance footage that had been taken out from the consulate before Jamal Khashoggi's visit. This implies that Turkey might have more evidence, more up their sleeves that it could bring out against Saudi Arabia if Saudi Arabia perhaps doesn't come to the table in some way with Turkey or doesn't admit what Turkey wanted to admit. So while those recordings, those specific recordings weren't mentioned, there was other evidence they claimed that President Erdogan claimed to have. So, and especially for him to do this in Parliament, in front of the members of Parliament from his party, this is not just an anonymous source from Turkey speaking to pro-government media here or to newspapers abroad. This is the president of Turkey in Parliament. It becomes as official as possible. So while we didn't hear about the recordings, we heard about other evidence, and it was on an official status. So perhaps that puts it to a higher level than the reports of the recording so far.
And Christina, Erdogan said yesterday that he wants Turkey to lead this investigation. How is he treading that line between holding Saudi Arabia to task and also stopping short of completely alienating the kingdom?
In one part of his in his speech, he had said that the squad who came to murder Khashoggi, he didn't say Saudi Arabia murdered Khashoggi, and I think that would be is really notable. He's not blaming, from what we saw in the speech, the country of Saudi Arabia. He's blaming the people who implemented and planned what he said was a premeditated murder. So that is focusing on some individuals, and he hasn't specified who those individuals are that can give leeway to Saudi Arabia. It shows, from my perspective, that he doesn't want to hit out at Saudi Arabia or take on Saudi Arabia, and I feel that would probably be what the government doesn't want as well. Turkey has a bad economy. It probably doesn't have an interest in taking on the country. It wants certain individuals to be brought to justice.
All right, thank you very much. Christina Jovanovski in Istanbul there. Well, meanwhile, the European Parliament has called on the European Commission to increase pressure on Saudi Arabia to punish those responsible for the killing. EU Foreign Affairs Representative Federica Mogherini said it was important for Europe to have a coordinated response.
We will not just wait for more clarity or ask for it. We will also continue to act together with our partners for achieving clarity. The European Union's reaction from now on will depend on the next steps that will be taken by Saudi authorities. We will continue, first of all, to coordinate among ourselves with united European Union positions, but also we will continue to coordinate with our partners around the world.
Well, you heard there from the EU Foreign Affairs representative, and to discuss this more, I'm joined in the studio by Alistair Sanford. Good morning, Alistair.
Good morning, Belle.
How united has the European response been to this?
Well, European countries have been united in backing the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, but not so far in action in terms of action taken. Now, to a certain extent, that's understandable. They're focusing, first of all, on finding out the exact truth of what happened. Behind that, of course, the reality is that national interests do come into play, and that's openly recognised to some extent. There's been lots of talk about whether to ban arms sales. We had a discussion on this on Raw Politics last night. The only country so far to have taken steps along those lines is Germany, one of the main exporters. But even then, Chancellor Merkel said that the sales were already fairly limited. She's acknowledging the extent of this is perhaps not as having as much impact as might be the case. And there's been also a suggestion that may only apply to new contracts because cancelling existing ones could cause all sorts of problems. France has now overtaken the UK as the top exporter of arms to Saudi Arabia from the EU. It's not cancelling any arms sales, and President Macron's playing down the significance. The UK also, one minister has said that we're not going to be throwing our hands up in the air. The reality is that thousands of jobs are at stake. There was, of course, a joint statement from the UK, France and Germany challenging the Saudi version of events. But so far, action really is limited to suspending visits to the country. For instance, the famous Davos in the Desert conference. And as we've seen, that hasn't stopped trade deals from being done. So
does that mean it's just business as usual?
Well, Federica Mogherini, we've heard saying that national interests must never curb freedom of speech, but the EU needs unanimity to act, and the 28 countries are far from drawing up any united response to this in terms of action. Spain's an interesting case. You might expect it to take a hard line because there's a new socialist government there. But the defence minister has rowed back on a move to cancel the delivery of some laser-guided bombs, which had led to fears they may be used in Yemen. And yesterday, the Congress rejected calls to veto arms sales. Why? Well, let's listen to this from the Spanish socialist MP Antonio Gutierrez.
Ahora bien, señorías,
for us to punish Saudi Arabia, which the United Nations hasn't done, would close a factory in our country that generates 6,000 jobs. It would be more logical and make more sense for us all to agree sanctions, or to punish Saudi Arabia by not buying their oil and gas, which is their main source of wealth.
So an interesting thought there. Instead of talking about arms sales, perhaps just stop buying their oil and gas. Again, perhaps easier said than done. But there's another element to this, and this has been raised. It's the cost of not acting. There were interesting comments yesterday from Marina Litvinenko, who is the widow of the Russian agent Alexander Litvinenko, who was murdered in London in 2006, with evidence strongly pointing to the Russian government. She said that this may lead countries to believe that it's just so easy to kill opponents on foreign soil. And she also brought up the case of the Skripals. So that's another worrying factor, really, that perhaps the cost of European countries finally not taking action against Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, that countries like Saudi Arabia might think they can act with impunity. Thank you. MEPs are set to vote today on a proposed ban on single-use plastics in a bid to cut marine pollution. If it's passed, the new legislation would forbid the sale of plastic products like straws, cutlery and cotton buds across the EU from 2021. Research has shown that plastic makes up 70% of all the waste in the world's oceans. Well, to talk more about this, I'm joined by Kevin Stairs. He's the EU Chemicals Policy Director at at Greenpeace Europe. Good morning to you, Mr. Stairs. Lovely to have you on the programme. Thanks for joining us. The vote, we're expecting the vote today. How confident are you that it will pass to ban these certain single-use products?
Well, I think that it will ban these products that you mentioned, and a number of other provisions that we're expecting will be adopted as well by the Parliament. So Greenpeace, as a member of the Rethink Plastic Alliance policy work in Brussels, sees this as a very good start to solve this problem, but it is only a start, and the real key will be up to the member states, the individual EU countries, in implementing the legislation to see if it really can provide the solutions we expect.
We've had recent research from scientists saying that they found 9 different types of microplastics in samples taken from the human gut. Microplastics seem to be where the biggest part of the problem is. Do you think this ban on single-use plastics would actually tackle that?
Well, it will certainly start to provide the solutions that we need. We have plastics everywhere today. It is in our air, on our land, in our water, from our taps, in the houses, and as you say, in the human body today. It is destroying wildlife through ingestion and entanglement, but it also has a chemical component. There are hazardous chemicals that are intentionally included in plastic production, as well as toxic pollution in the wider environment that attaches to these plastic particles. And those chemicals are also entering the food chain, affecting wildlife and humans. The real problem, though, as I say, is going to be in the implementation at the member state, the individual country level, in adopting legislation to significantly reduce the consumption of single-use plastics. And not only single-use plastics, we really have to move away from this throwaway culture. It's a situation where the real problem is actually systemic. And by that, I mean the corporate takeover of our political decision-making. This is absolutely unacceptable. All over the world, we have a trend where the corporations have become so powerful that they are influencing and forcing the political system to move in their direction rather than in the direction of the safety of people and the livelihood of our environment.
Although we are seeing moves by member governments to try and put in place measures to stop climate change, to stop this sort of plastic waste. Thank you very much, Kevin. I'm afraid we could go on all morning. Kevin Stairs, the EU's Chemicals Policy Director at Greenpeace Europe there. Now, dozens of people have been injured after an escalator had a malfunction in Italy. Angela and our team in the Cube have been looking at this.
That's right. Well, this incident happened at the city centre Repubblica station in Rome yesterday. The station was packed with fans who were making their way to a Champions League football match at Rome's Olympic Stadium. People on the escalator in the metro going down it. That escalator, when it accelerated, people unable to get off it in time, and they were piled up at the bottom, many of them injured. Let's just have a look at a video clip of that incident. Well, you could see in that video the escalator speeding up, not giving a chance for people to get off it. Well, at least 20 people were injured, 7 of them seriously injured. Many of those football fans who were attending that Champions League final match, many of them Russian who'd gone to watch CSKA play against Roma in that football match. Well, in response, the fire department tweeted this video of emergency services attending the scene. They were praised by Rome's mayor for their immediate response to that incident. Many of those injured treated at the scene, many also taken to hospital. Well, the mayor of Rome attended the scene afterwards as well, and in a statement she said that an investigation was now underway to find out what happened. She said her thoughts were with those that had been injured, and she also thanked emergency services for those who responded so quickly to what happened. And then let's just pull up a tweet here as well from the Russian embassy in Italy. Now, they confirmed that up to 30 fans had been caught up in this. And in a subsequent tweet, they said that 2 fans had been treated in hospital, had to undergo surgery, they said, as a result of their injuries. Well, now an investigation underway, and we will keep you up to date.